On that note, calling to order the November 17th, 2025 East End Township Board of Supervisor meeting. Can everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Second. Any items that anyone want to pull out? Board or staff? Any public comment? Any, hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to board motions, presentations, and resolutions. First up, we have the ordinance authorizing execution of cable franchise agreements.
Let John start you off and then
Sure.
and color do it.
Thanks.
Good evening. So we've talked about this a few times over the last 5 months or so. We did contract with the Cohen Law Group starting back in early summer, late spring, as part of the consortium of Suffolk County communities to renegotiate or Verizon franchise fee contract. So you were part of, I think it ended up being 22 communities, which was purchasing power, brought your overall cost of the project down significantly. What's before you today is the final consideration for a new term agreement with Verizon. Your solicitors reviewed it, staff reviewed it. It appears to be more beneficial than previous contracts. Speaking with the law firm, they were very pleased with the outcome. A lot of land information in there, but there's only so many things that you can change in a franchise fee agreement to begin with. So if we got to a good place, it's up for your consideration, sir.
Great. I'll make a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Any board comment?
I have one question. It was mentioned by the fire department, part of this agreement includes internet access at the firehouse. They didn't think it was particularly good internet access. Was that changed?
They're listed as one of the entities getting the free cable. Nothing changed, sort of. John, you got it.
Yeah, no, nothing out of this.
So they are identified specifically as one of the entities.
So in essence, nothing changed.
Yes, nothing changed.
I think that's right, and the free connections involve basic service, which is at minimum the over-the-air channels. And then the rest is at the discretion of the cable operator, and we found that is almost universal. Whether it's Verizon or Comcast, whoever's offering the franchise, the days are gone when they'll give you everything in HBO, which I know sometimes fire departments, when they spend a lot of hours waiting for calls, that's attractive, but we've not been able to negotiate that, and the Cohen firm has not either.
Okay. Any other board comment? Any public comment? We had a second for the motion, right? Okay. Hearing no public comments, all in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it.
Alex, Alex is on the line. Is that
Is it?
Yeah, guys.
that's an affirmative from you also, Alex? For the minutes?
Yep, I'm here. Aye.
So do we just approve to advertise it, or is it?
No, it's already been advertised. Andy can tell you about that too.
Yeah, since you had you had a public hearing for purposes of input on cable related needs. And once you got through that, our belief looking back at the process was there was baked into that, bring it to us when it's ready for voting. So in this case, the advertisement was done with the distributor.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is the proposed ordinance prohibiting the feeding of deer and to authorize an advertisement. I believe this items, we've discussed this, at least one, maybe two meetings, and this is, what
Yes,
step is this, Andy?
and this is part two.
Yeah.
So you discussed and expressed your comfort with the prohibition of deer feeding and the provisions. And so we've advertised it, so a vote tonight would be to enact the ordinance.
Okay.
If you're ready to do so.
I'm willing to make that motion. Do I have a second? Any board comment? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor of the proposed ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Next up is the appointment of supervisors to review submissions for vacancy board and zoning hearing board.
I'll just tell you a little bit about it. So you don't have a liaison for those two groups. The first one, the vacancy board doesn't meet. And then you don't have a liaison for the zoning hearing board. So how you have done this in the past is you have appointed supervisors to review submissions and come back to you with a recommendation. Rework.
Do we have any volunteers? Sean? Go on. I'll do it as well. Oh, no, Susan, oh, no, you spoke. Okay, Sean and Susan. Should have held on to that.
Wait, just a second word.
I don't think I need to do a formal motion, right? If it's by consensus, unless somebody else has from.
We'll just have the minutes reflect that there's a unanimous consent to have Sean and Sue serve as those representatives.
Great.
And it'll be easy. It'll be a call from us, giving you the lay of the land, who's applied for what, and then it's up to you to take it from there.
Sure. Next up is the resolution for police department DEA fund purchases.
Yeah, so you had unappropriated cash that came from DEA for the work that Sesher had done a few years back. And you are spending it only by resolution. So you had one resolution identifying some items. There's two more items on it, and that's what Sesher can talk to you about, the two items tonight.
Great.
Both are listed in the packet. It's for a used motorcycle. Radnor is getting rid of one of the motorcycles. And I also had an attachment for kind of explaining the intent of the motorcycle. Requirements, what it would be used for. Happy to answer any questions on that. I know we discussed it at the our liaison a while back. It's going to be a limited use, experienced riders, not for general patrol.
Is that just one motorcycle?
It is for one.
So the other group didn't include a motorcycle, this is the only motorcycle.
Yeah, this is what we're going with. It's the cheapest option right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a good price.
yeah, it's a great price for that. They take good care of you. And the second item, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The second item is a speed trailer. What we currently use for speed enforcement, not speed enforcement, but making people aware of the speed or speed signs. So this is a small trailer. It has solar panels. It's a message board, 3-line message board. Can be used for events. Sometimes we have places where we can put a speed trailer to alert motorists of their speed. So it's kind of a nicer, updated message board than speed trailer.
How many officers do we have that can ride a motorcycle?
One of the requirements that we want to put in place is that they have to complete Philadelphia's motorcycle program. So as of right now, no one has that, but we have a handful of officers that have ridden bikes for a considerable amount of time, still ride today. We would look to slowly put them through Philadelphia's training academy as we can get them in there. But in the end, it would probably be under a handful of them. just because of the more stringent requirements that we're putting on ourselves.
So if we bought the bike, we wouldn't have anyone who could formally use it, or?
So Rander's getting rid of the bike now because they purchased a new one, so we asked that they hold it for us and hopefully for us to purchase it. But we have one officer set up for the next class in the beginning of the year for Philly's Academy, so it wouldn't be very long before they would be approved to ride it.
How long's the class?
It's 2 or 3 weeks.
But you say you talked to the work group about that?
I did.
Okay.
We talked.
And is, is there a need for the motorcycle and work groups? And I guess Alex is up there
Yeah,
too.
yeah. We thought it was a reasonable thing, you know, for like you're saying, I think you said in your memo, it's only gonna be used for.
For community engagement, community events.
So like when we have the July 4th parade,
Correct,
your officer would ride it in front of them. So it's not gonna be used a lot.
correct, which is why the price worked out instead of purchasing a new one.
Do you know what the annual upkeep is gonna be for the bike? Cause it's probably not just a once.
Yeah, just the initial, it already has the lights on it. So it's just outfitting, purchasing some equipment for the officer to ride it, radio communication and stuff. Decking out the bike, and then minimal cost of just maintenance, oil changes and stuff like that.
The only reason why I ask is because I know police vehicles can be very expensive. So I mean, are we sure that this isn't gonna be like a money suck for you guys?
I don't believe it is. Because Radnor takes good care of their motorcycles.
I think there's a difference between a patrol vehicle that's running 24 hours a day. I mean, we don't run any vehicles 24 hours a day, but ones that are doing that. And a
Yeah.
motorcycle is pulled out of the shed every 3 months.
Yeah, that's fair. The vehicle maintenance is up on our vehicles, and because we have some motor vehicles that do a lot of miles on them.
Okay, so this isn't being used for patrol purposes?
It isn't.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll make a motion to approve the requested purchases of used motorcycle and a message trailer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other board comment? Any public comment? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Route 30 corridor project update.
Sure, Colleen will introduce you to the topic and then have some people from Bowman here who will take you through a presentation.
Sure. East End Township was awarded a grant, an LSA grant to do a study along Route 30 corridor initiative study for complete streets. Bowman and Tom Comitta's office has paired together and they are collecting information to put this study together. This past Thursday on the 13th, we had a public workshop, which was attended, well attended by the public to obtain feedback, suggestions, opinions, concerns, all of that. And this is just one of a handful, well, I wouldn't call it a handful, but a couple of presentations, updates to the Board of Supervisors on what they've gathered and where they are now.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great.
I'm Randy, if it's okay, introduce your team, please.
Sure. So Randy Waltemeyer, I'm with Bowman, the project manager. Chris?
Chris Williams, also with Bowman.
And I'm Erin Gross with Thomas Committed Associates.
Great. So yeah, we thank you for that introduction, Colleen. We do have a slide deck that was given and just want to give you an update on kind of where we are. We're about a third of the way through the project. So we're scoped to have 3 updates to the board. Yeah, so with that, we'll jump in. probably don't need to remind this group, but this initiative was well documented in the township's comprehensive plan, specifically calling out the recommendation for looking at a complete street and in fact, even more specifically, a complete street plan, which is exactly what set the groundwork for the grant and this initiative. Next slide, Colin. So just a real quick definition, we grabbed this from the county's complete street policy. Basically, what is a complete street? We're looking to accommodate all modes, whether it's pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users. We know there's a lot of that on the Route 30 corridor. We're looking to really elegantly bring that all together on Lancaster Avenue. Next slide. So we in our research looked at some comparables, and Easton Road in the Glenside and Cheltenham, Abington area is a really interesting comparable. If you want to look here, the next slide is a before. So this was kind of a before, and then quickly to the next one here. They got a federal enhancement grant, really similar to some of our concepts. They had the necessity for that center turn lane, but didn't love the aesthetics of it. And here they chose a stamped asphalt to really still provide that center turn lane, but also kind of integrated into the palette of Easton Road here.
But before, they only had one lane in each direction. They didn't have two lanes like we do.
That is correct. This is just looking at, I have another few examples of some where they've instead gone in that.
I kept on going back and forth, couldn't figure out what.
This is more just the aesthetic enhancements. That's a notable difference here. But still about 15, if we go to our next slide, Lancaster Avenue in the village has 15,000 vehicles per day, and Easton Road is very comparable, has almost 16,000. Now, one thing to note is traffic volumes in Berwyn are less than they are to your east and west. Paoli has upwards of 19,000 vehicles per day, and Wayne goes north of 20,000, up to 21,000. Really, the most comparable local stretch of 30 is further to the west of Paoli. That would be in the East Whiteland Fraser area, where and it's even west of 401, where Lancaster Avenue there is 3 lanes. That 1 lane in each direction, center turn lane. So for comparability, that Fraser section is most notable. Next slide.
Did you look into where's the traffic go?
252 pulls a lot of traffic.
352.
East Whiteland?
Oh, no, in terms of why does the
Volume lanes are on the other end.
Gotcha.
Why is it
much higher volume?
Yeah, you get that a lot of traffic, whether it's coming Darby Paoli Road and cutting across. 252 takes traffic up to the 202 corridor, so you end up with a volume lull there in the village area.
The Sugartown Road.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of traffic on.
Yeah. I'm sure you're well versed in but we see today, one of our most problematic intersections is the Lancaster Avenue, Old Bridge Avenue intersection. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And of course, we've heard the thought of missing sidewalk gaps. One of those most notably, probably the one we've heard the most about, is right in front of the trading station. So really the goal of this project would be to find recommendations and improvements for this and many other hot spots in the corridor. Next slide, Colin. So we're taking an alternatives-based approach, very common in the planning profession, where we start with our project goals, test them against many alternatives, and then really screen them against those goals to help us narrow down and find a preferred alternative through an alternatives analysis process. So next slide, Colleen has we started even before we drafted the goals. We had a very strong initial public engagement, including a survey almost 900 participants. We had about a 3/4 of those being township residents, but we know more than the township residents drive the corridor. So it was great that we got other feedback from, say, Tredyffrin residents and the surrounding community. But in the middle here, we have, we asked this question, would you agree today Route 30 is an appealing place to walk around, shop, or dine? And we had more than half disagree or strongly disagree with that statement. And moreover, then we asked, well, what's really holding back Berwyn? What are the key, what factors make Berwyn less appealing? And things like lack of benches, the speed and noise of traffic, missing sidewalk gaps, and that lack of defined parking were some of the key factors that were illuminated and identified in the survey. So that really helped us, and we bounced these also off the planning commission, help us get to our project goals. So we came up with these 6 things like safety, accommodating all modes, addressing parking. Certainly, the Bowman team also had the privilege of doing the village parking plan, and we want to look at opportunities to really advance the parking recommendations through this effort as well. Other things such as placemaking, economic development, improved quality of life. This is more than a transportation plan. It really is an economic and quality of life project for the village. Next slide. So really, as we've developed 7 alternatives like that, all in different ways advance the project goals. Really, there's 2 distinguishing qualities that separate those. As you'll see, about half of our alternatives kept Lancaster Avenue as that 4-lane cross section, which we have today. And then others look to propose to modify Lancaster Avenue into a 3-lane cross section. Again, with 1 travel lane each direction with that center turn lane. And then the other distinguishing back to our Lancaster Avenue Old Lancaster Bridge intersection, that really is, and I'm not going to break any news here, but the bottleneck of Berwyn. And so from that capacity standpoint, it's really looking at if you're going to solve some of the congestion. We looked at multiple alternatives here at the Old Lancaster Bridge intersection. Next slide. So really, as we to first look into the 3-lane cross section, really I had this screenshot of the parking plan, and really it could start to do some very interesting things at the level of on-street parking. Right now, there's 13 parking spaces provided mostly along the south side of Lancaster Avenue, fairly shoehorned in and some not consistently, but certainly where space was afforded. One of the most interesting parts of this concept would be that if the 3-lane cross section would allow us to more than double the availability of on-street parking, going from 13 parking spaces up to 32 as depicted here. And then we also, if you look on the right side of this depiction, and this is very conceptual, but it also, we also heard that especially in this area where there's no traffic signals, that it can be really difficult to cross Route 30, Lancaster Avenue. And so that depiction of a crosswalk there, really then you could, instead of crossing what today is 4 travel lanes, about 45 feet of pavement roadway width, instead you could cross 1 lane and then get to a center refuge island, and then cross the other side as a separate, bringing that down to a 2-stage crossing, but potentially safer and less intimidating in that location.
I don't understand how you get 32 spaces out of that.
They're not all depicted on there. This is a screenshot, but if you would running the full 3-lane cross section from Midland all the way up to the Old Lancaster Bridge, in totality there, you'd net a total of 32 spaces.
But some of those are not where they're needed. I mean, that's the problem we have today. We have lots of parking where it's not needed. So that's not, a parking space that we get where it's not needed is not gonna help.
I would submit that you have a density of businesses all the way from end to end that all could benefit from improved parking. And being, I think one of the other things the parking study showed was, yes, you have a overall supply, but the vast majority of that is privatized and unavailable
Right.
to you.
To me, this.
This breaks through a lot of that.
To me, the solution is public parking, like a public parking.
And this, that
No,
could be.
a public parking lot.
Mhm.
That's the solution that would work. This solution.
Yeah, but this isn't replacing that,
Right.
correct? This is not, if you do this, you don't have to do a public parking lot.
Right,
The public parking lot is not part of this scope.
Right.
That's a distinct and probably good idea. But not part of this scope and not in conflict with it. Nothing
No.
that you would do here would prevent you from procuring a parking.
you could add on to that as you go, absolutely.
Arguably, it would augment the public parking that you would do.
Yeah.
No, that's no question. I guess.
Next slide. So now here is another example, and I will note, we're chatting with Nick afterwards, this traffic volume is off due to a PennDOT mapping error, but that aside, Bethlehem Pike in Flowertown is an example that was converted from 4 lanes to the 3-lane cross section. So the more accurate volume, it actually has 17,000 vehicles per day. So it's actually more than Lancaster Avenue in the village is today. So this was done through a resurfacing and safety project. And was found that the 3-lane cross section just provided better safety benefits and otherwise, and was implemented through a PennDOT safety project. Next slide. Another comparable is Upper Darby. This is actually a project I managed at my former firm. Another one, a lot going on, and ultimately it was recommended to implement a 3-lane cross section rather than 4. And again was done through resurfacing. So one of the things, I won't get ahead of myself, but one of the next things we want to ask is PennDOT, when are they planning to repave the Route 30 again? And it could provide some opportunity for us. That's one of the things we're intrigued to learn from PennDOT. So generally, if you roll up the goals of the project and compare them against the 2 main variants, whether to keep Lancaster Avenue 4 lanes or modify it to 3, really you come away with some takeaways, grossly being 1, keeping Lancaster Avenue at 4 lanes. There are really only limited opportunities to advance these project goals. There's some, it's not a total wash, but there's limited opportunities. Comparably, we're seeing more significant opportunities to advance the project goals with the 3-lane cross section. The second driver is our Lancaster Avenue, Old Lancaster, Bridge Avenue intersection. Notably, the green arrows depict that it is offset, and with that comes what's known as a split phase to the traffic signal, meaning the southbound gets a green, then Bridge gets its own green. That sets up an inefficiency in traffic flow, and then as depicted in orange, there's no eastbound left turn lane. The volumes there, really, there's a lot of left turns in the eastbound, especially in the morning. So you'll not be surprised, but some of the alternatives are proposing to A, add a left turn lane, and B, find a way to handle that offset nature of the intersection.
That's a huge talk about putting it up and you just went right to it. The traffic there is awful. I mean, school and the buses, and then you have that 1 lane on the bridge, and half of the times they have to come out. It's just a mess.
Yep.
Shouldn't we be talking to Tredeffern about fixing that bridge? Because that's in Tredeffern, that's a major problem to this.
This question came up in the survey. It came up in the public meeting, and I will say this. I started the county planning commission in my first of my career in 2000. Already Parksburg Borough was almost 15 years into attempting to replace a bridge in the borough. Still, fast forward to this day, 25 years later, they are still trying to get that bridge replaced. Think both from the cost and Amtrak coordination and the time coordination. We would frankly like to deliver to the township a plan that can be implementable faster than that similar timeline. So where candidly, we looked as a consultant team at the feasibility of the bridge replacement, but there's no way around those time barriers, cost barriers, and candidly, even the alignment of getting around the curve, huge. So we looked at, but through coordination with the planning commission, otherwise, took that alternative and have since dismissed it in the alternatives analysis, for all those reasons.
Okay, then in my estimation, we haven't solved the problem.
Well, I think
I looked at
your
it.
definition is, have we addressed the traffic flow? And actually that'll get to, hang with me for just a few slides. So we looked at, let me just go back up real quick, Colleen.
Sorry.
We looked at 1A is the no build. It's just the do nothing alternative. But then we added on top of that six different additional alternatives. And we'll get to, and let me go to the next slide here, Colleen. But I know the $1 million question is, how does this work from a traffic analysis perspective? So if you want to go to the next slide, Colleen, we looked out 20 years to 2045. And even before we started to look at that, we know A, Trader Joe's just came online, and B, there's a major development, the Berwyn Square project. So we added their additional traffic into our 2025 counts, and then we compounded that growth over the next 20 years. By the book, today we would have to compound at a 0.4%, but we wanted to remain conservative, making sure this would work long-term. So we elected to double the current growth rate for Chester County. Instead, used a 0.8% growth rate over the 20 years to ensure that this would work long-term for the township and for Berwyn. Next slide. So this was kind of the roll-up and the fatal flaws analysis. Up in that upper right corner, I don't want to get too deep into traffic engineering, but you've probably heard these before, that there's a level of service, it measures delay, and you can grade any intersection and even any movement of the intersection on an A through F scale. And similar to schooling, if you have an F, that is generally bad and is unacceptable. We're seeking to avoid level of service F. So 3 of the alternatives, and notably the do nothing alternative, fails 20 years from now, and we have multiple Fs in the do nothing alternative. But similarly, and actually just for brevity's sake, so 2 of the other alternatives also failed in that future condition. So really, I'm only going to spend time further detailing for your benefit the alternatives that kind of still in the running once you run them up against the 20-year growth analysis. Next slide. So back to our challenging intersection. As we well know, that split phase offset nature is challenge number 1. And so what you see here in this alternative 1C, that instead of looking to realign the bridge, instead the Bridge Avenue northbound approach is contemplated for realignment. No doubt about it, you got to move one of the 2. But our technical opinion is it's much more feasible and achievable to contemplate moving the northbound Bridge Avenue approach. Additionally, it adds a left turn lane. We said lots of lefts, especially eastbound. So this is the most aggressive alternative where it will require the largest footprint. You can see including needing some right of way from the tire shop and the car wash, and even along the frontage of Lancaster Avenue. So that's all to be figured out, coordinated as design would move forward. Clearly, we've not yet had any property coordination. That's all down the road in a future phase. But this one, probably not surprisingly, does really well from a traffic perspective. It's because there's 5 lanes and then going to 4 as you get into the village. Next slide. So 1D is another one if 1C was maybe too much, too ambitious, it still realigns the northbound Bridge Avenue, but it does not provide that added left turn lane. So you get some of the benefit of 1C. It's a little bit more cost effective because you're not then impacting and less impactful, as you'd see, to the tire shop, the car wash, and the frontage thereof. So you get some of 1C, but with some trade-offs there, as you can see. Next slide, Colleen. And then now alternative 2 are those that instead of the 4-lane cross section, contemplate a 3-lane cross section. And largely here at the old Lancaster Bridge Avenue intersection, they're largely the same ideas, just instead on Lancaster Avenue, we have 3 lanes instead of a 4-lane cross section. It still requires the same realignment. No getting around that. That is the critical fix at the intersection. And really, what we see from the capacity analysis is that is really the main improvement, that Lancaster Avenue it moves along fairly comparably between the 3-lane cross section, this alternative, and the ones above it. The criticality here is that realignment. Next slide. Now, not to over focus on, we heard also lots of public interest. What are you going to do at Lancaster Avenue in Midland? Those alternatives that would keep Lancaster Avenue at 4 lanes, at a minimum, are going to provide the 2 missing pedestrian crossings. The number one thing we heard was how hard it is to cross Lancaster Avenue at Midland. Now, if the Berwyn Square project moves forward, that project would be committed to those missing improvements. But one way or another, that will be recommended and look to be advanced through the corridor implementation plan. Up in the upper right, 2A largely does exactly what alternative 1 is looking at, providing all the pedestrian crossings. And then in the bottom right, we have also a roundabout considered at the 30 Midland intersection. I will say we also looked at the roundabout up at the bridge, but that was one that when we stress tested it in the traffic analysis, it did not hold up. We saw failing levels of service. You would either need to have more space, so we dropped that out of the running. Here at Midland and 30, we have less traffic conflicts. Here the roundabout is working operationally.
Randy, if I can just jump in. So on the right-hand side, just to reiterate, so on the right-hand side, the 2A at the top is a 3-lane cross section on Lancaster Avenue, but it's really just maintaining traffic signal control, right? It's 1 lane each direction, it's a traffic signal, it's a center left turn lane, but then it's introducing or adding the pedestrian crossings. 2C in the lower right corner Again, it's a 3-lane cross section, but it's adding the roundabout to the Midland intersection. Under the alternative 1 options on the left-hand side, well, you already have 4 lanes at Midland. You don't need to change much in terms of the physical lane infrastructure, but what we are adding are the 2 pedestrian crossings. So just wanted to make sure that that's clear to everybody.
Question, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Was any consideration given to closing Old Lancaster Ave to car traffic at that Route 30 and Midland intersection?
As in so for at Midland,
No.
it's been talked about, not at a technical study level, we have heard thoughts of making it one way. But we haven't advanced any technical, traffic evaluation of that.
Yeah, and if I can jump in real quick, so we are meeting regularly with the planning commission through this project. They are the steering committee for this project. They've also brought that up to us, but they have a separate bike ped group that is evaluating options to address that sort of lakeside area, the area underneath the railroad bridge, back behind Casey's and School of Rock, that whole section. So that is something that they are looking at on a parallel path, or will be looking at maybe as part of their 2026 work program. So something we've heard about, but not something that we're actively, at least at this point, considering as part of this project.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Andy, question for you. What are the legal requirements for that intersection realignment that currently occupies the footprint where the Tires Plus parking lot is, moving back to the previous scenario we were talking about?
Legal requirement meaning in obtaining the right of way.
Correct.
That can happen 2 ways. One is with negotiation with the property owner. And the other is the power of eminent domain. If you get that far and the municipality is 100% sure it wants to move forward with a plan, those are the 2 paths.
Understood. Thanks, Andy.
And we haven't done mapping. We don't know how much of that is already in the right of way.
Correct.
Right, so some of a fair portion of it could already be right of way.
Yeah, and I defer to the Bowman folks, but just from some of the sketches, it looks like some of those scenarios would eat up parking on some of those commercial properties or areas that are otherwise designated for development.
To me, that raises the issue, well, so Lancaster Avenue goes, or Old Lancaster by Midland, that's a township road. And how come the PC didn't want to explore that, or
So
you didn't want to explore that?
No, not that we didn't want to. When the project, well, if I'm saying anything wrong, kick me, but when the project was first scoped out, it was really about Lancaster Avenue and maintaining Lancaster Avenue and making it a complete street. When we start talking about closing that road, which I don't know what we want to call that road. I guess it's Midland, it's Lakeside, it gets called a lot of different things, but we all know the road we're talking about. It's that narrow road by the gold building, the bronze building, excuse me, and School of Rock. Yeah, all that.
So it feeds out, it's like a
It
weird
does.
feed out. And
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to fit. I mean, it is
It kind of takes on like its own little life of its own, because there's a lot of things that you can do there. And anything you do there, you also need to figure out how we're gonna get traffic underneath the Amtrak bridge. So I think the PC has sort of decided to pull that out as a separate project that they're looking at.
Okay.
But they have shared with us some of their thoughts and ideas, and we've heard thoughts and ideas from the community. So I think if there's traction on some of those ideas, we can certainly kind of memorialize the interest in doing something in our study. We're just not scoped to look at that in detail.
Fair. And my thought was closing that portion of Old Lancaster really from the bridge to Route 30 and leaving the portion that has Lakeside from Route 30 to the bridge open at that point. So there is still some access at that point. But the reason why I think it is applicable here is it just adds so much complication to that intersection. There's just for the quantity of car traffic that really uses that portion of it, it's just, in my opinion, not worth the hassle. Now, I don't live in that area where I would probably be using that every day, but the reality is just the car traffic is so minimal compared to the amount of consideration and space that has to be given in a very high pedestrian commercial area that could otherwise really use the space. It just seems like a really attractive option to do that. So understood, it's not necessarily in your scope. I think I kind of would like to make it part of your scope, but curious what the rest of the supervisors think about that as well.
And that's part of why It's here with that idea of getting your feedback, so you're not making this kind of observation at the last meeting.
The PC has requested in their 2026 initiatives to have some funding to evaluate the Old Lancaster Lakeside Road and the bridge.
Are they saying, you're just saying closing off the one side? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, they're talking about evaluating,
Yeah.
whether it be one way, close it, ways to improve the turn. So that is, they wanna have that as one of their projects in 2026.
Okay, I just see a lot.
And presumably why it's so complicated is you had businesses that couldn't be accessed otherwise.
Yeah.
So if you closed it, you would shut off at least 4 businesses that would have no access to a public road.
And truck access.
And similar to the alternative-based approach we've taken, you really have to set up a whole similar process of multiple alternatives. Are we closing? Which direction, which side, keeping it open? So yeah, it's for all those reasons, I don't disagree, there would be tremendous benefit to combining it, but it for the time right now, it's kind of a study all in and of itself.
And all that being said, we
Thanks.
would be happy to look at that if the township wants to, which is when the township submitted the grant application for this project. No, those ideas weren't known, so it's not in the project, but it is something that could be looked at.
Understood. Thanks.
So really brings us to where we are now with the alternatives analysis. Next slide there, Colleen. So in fact, I have a little bit of so we had, as Colleen noted, a very good, very well attended public meeting, and we had the business breakfast. So actually recognizing we delivered this slide deck on Thursday at the same time we were giving. So I actually I wanted to, for the benefit of even this evening's discussion, kind of bring you up to speed on some of what we heard. I'm gonna try to do this here. So we had all 7 of our alternatives that we explained similar, and we asked everyone at the meeting to become really a grader of the alternatives. So we gave them 7 boards like this that said, here are 6 project goals. And then we had them 3 columns here. Either are these alternatives either maintaining the status quo, modestly improving, advancing the goals, or significantly advancing the goals. So I'll leave this here for folks who are in the room. So we then rolled that up in the graphic you have in front of you. We really put that, understanding I didn't want to bring 7 boards for you to, but this is the roll up of that. That really, we put a 1 to 5 scale. So if the vote was one of these push pins, if it's only maintaining the status quo, we gave that a vote of 1. If it was modestly advancing the goal, we gave it a vote of 3. And if it was significantly advancing the goal, we gave it a vote of 5. So it really puts this on a 1 to 5 scale. And really we had almost 20 folks come out to the business breakfast in the morning, and then another close to 50 come out in the evening. And really this rolls up and averages how they were viewing all of these alternatives, the 4 that remain from the traffic analysis, and really how the average voting came back. And as of right now, I think if you compare the 4-lane alternatives in blue and orange to the green and the lighter blue are our 3-lane alternatives. At least the early returns from the voting and the early returns from the public and business community, you're seeing that the collective opinion of the people who attended is that the 3-lane cross section is scoring better and or advancing it's felt by the those that they're advancing the goals of the project more substantially than the 4-lane cross alternatives would be. So just providing that the hot off the press data set and just again, we'll continue to discuss and work through with the planning commission.
Our 1D that on Bridge Avenue, it looks like there's a sidewalk along it, but it doesn't look like there's a sidewalk on 2A and 2C along the bridge. Is that true, or is it just not drawn in there?
What section would that be?
If I'm looking at the 1D with the turquoise drawing, it looks like there's a sidewalk on either side of Bridge Avenue.
Oh, look,
If you go back to the, if you want to go back, Colleen, to one. I think that's just, but let's make sure I understand.
Because 2A and 2C do not have any, it doesn't look like the sidewalk is drawn in on it, but it's also very close to the building. I don't know, that's the tire building, I think.
it is.
Yeah.
So the one thing we'll offer initially, so the next step in the project process will be to do more detailed conceptual layouts of all the improvements. Right now, we're showing something more illustrative, sketch oriented,
I
just to give some.
Saw it on the one.
Yeah, no, but that's a great comment, and when we get into actually narrowing down the alternatives and conceptually laying something out, we will have all of that very clearly shown.
Yeah, really the outer lines there are actually a small shoulder provided on that. They're actually not sidewalks, but that's not to say we wouldn't provide sidewalks. But just to be.
Because it's awfully close to the building in 2A and 2C, they can maybe have a sidewalk.
And those, and the exact layout's gonna change once we get into design.
Yeah.
The one thing about, since I've already started speaking, let me just talk a little bit, so. With the idea of a complete streets project, we have a lot of goals, right? We want to enhance sort of quality of life, we want to enhance the sense of place and streetscape and placemaking. We can make some drastic improvements with a 4-lane cross section, right? We can fix the intersection of Bridge and Old Lancaster, we can maintain the 4-lane cross section, we can improve the streetscape, we can add that placemaking. But we can also do a lot of things with the 3-lane cross section. The 3-lane cross section opens up other opportunities. It makes it a little easier, less daunting for a pedestrian walking along the corridor. Point being is both projects, both alternatives will result in benefits to the community. I want to make that very clear. It's just that with the 3-lane alternative, we probably have more options available to us to do creative things, which is why I think the community is favoring the 3-lane section. At the end of the day, it's, the community obviously has some influence in the process. The steering committee, all of you certainly have influence in the process. The cake is not baked here. We are not coming with a fully baked cake. And maybe where Randy was going to go next is, this is a state road. And at the end of the day, we have to convince PennDOT that these alternatives make sense. And they're going to have something to say as to what they believe is the best alternative. So I say all that because I don't want anybody to fall too much in love with one idea or the other, because the next step in the process is to speak with PennDOT and they will be the final authority on what happens on this road.
Yeah, and that actually sets us up well for our next steps. We're looking to schedule exactly that, a PennDOT coordination meeting in December. Then we're due to come back to the Planning Commission in January. Really, that'll really help to zero us in. Then we're looking to return here for a second briefing in February. And then making our way to a second community workshop in May. Certainly by May, we'll want to have had a preferred alternative selected and then presented to the community by May. Really sets us up for preparing a draft plan through June, and then a final briefing and really a delivery of that draft plan by September. And I think I can quickly just one other thing, if for your we also asked the community just by dots, like some of what they would like to also see on the corridor. It's very, as we select an alternative, it just helps for us, like what palette to pick from. Interestingly, there was a great interest in festivals and community events along the corridor, sitting areas, street trees. So it gives us a really good palette as we select an alternative. Then we'll be working with the town committed team on really bringing a lot of these into the plan and the reality thereof. So with that, I'll happily take any questions.
I have again, comment that I've made many times. I'm completely against this idea of us taking it from 4 lanes down. When I first moved to this area, Route 30 was 3 lanes in each direction. You would not believe how bad, and this is what, 1987, how bad that intersection was then, right? It's only gotten worse. So I'm aghast that we would even think of going from 4 lanes down to 3. And on top of that, if we do go down to 4 lanes, you know, we'll look and see though there's less traffic. Well, that traffic's gonna be on our local roads. It just makes no sense to me that we would do this. Creating I think of traffic as like a fluid flowing. So if you create a constriction, it just spreads out to somewhere else. So that's where I am on this. I'm not convinced. I hear all the nice words about, oh, it'll be beautiful with trees and this and this. I think it's going to be a disaster. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I get.
And you don't, it's not like you can solve that one tonight, so
No.
you made it like, so you don't feel the need that you have to talk him out of that in the next 30 seconds.
I know, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just one thing we do need to understand that the idea of the 3-lane section, what it does is just so we understand where there is some benefit to traffic flow. Right now, if you have a vehicle turning left in the inside through lane, it happens to me all the time when I drive through Wayne or Ardmore. If you're a left turning vehicle in that inside through lane, basically it renders that lane ineffective. It becomes a de facto left turn lane. And now you're really just down to 1 lane in each direction when there's a left turn vehicle. So the idea of the 3-lane section is it brings all your left turning vehicles into a center lane. They're no longer impeding your through movements, so it helps your through movements, although in a single lane, they can flow more effectively. I understand the concerns, not trying to talk you out of it, but there is some positive trade-off in terms of better managing and more safely managing your left turning vehicles. So that is the concept. Right?
Only other thing I would say is we have developed video renderings as a movie in using a product called Sim Traffic that, and I even have them on a thumb drive, but for sake of time, we won't go to the, but if you or the board would like a briefing, would you like to see those? It shows you the PM is the worst condition, shows you 10 minutes of what that would look like, so that you can view it again, what it should look like in 2045 with all the methodology we've used. I think what it will show you is back to the liquid equation. We are fixing right now the system bottleneck. That is your Lancaster Bridge intersection. Once you fix that, the bottleneck is not the throughput of Lancaster, and that's what the videos would show for you. And I'd be, if whether a side briefing or otherwise, we could roll up our sleeves and talk traffic all day. And I think it would show that the stress test we're putting it under, yes, we have to fix that intersection undeniably, but once you do, the 3-lane cross section is not the bottleneck of this corridor.
What about the SEPTA buses?
They would be provided, meaning, what's the,
Well,
where they would.
if you have a 3-lane and there's a SEPTA bus that has how many stops in Berwyn, you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. They probably, if I were to guess, probably 5. Just they
In
don't.
this section, they probably have 2.
What's that?
SEPTA stops, I think they probably just have 2.
Certainly at Midland, probably up at the bridge, and probably 1 or 2 spots in between. So your question is, you're mostly concerned about getting them out of the flow of traffic?
Well, that they don't like to do that, but that would certainly be an alternative to, but they don't like to get out of the traffic, so.
They do not like
Typically,
to bring.
the traffic stops at every one of the SEPTA stops.
Yes, if you would have of someone getting on or off the bus, but only just being notable. The bus is only gonna stop when either a rider is getting on or off. We could look at the ridership data. Honestly, we'll get back to you on what the that data would be.
Yeah, I didn't even know how many times a day.
Yeah.
I've ridden those buses before. They are very infrequent. Even in peak periods, it's probably every half hour or so. It's the 105 and the 106. They do not come around very frequently.
And Chris, your little traffic simulator takes a lot of things into consideration. You said including bad drivers. Does it take buses?
We did not bake buses into the, we didn't have buses at every stop, so that's not factored in.
But we can certainly look at that. I think we will collectively realize that the bus actually stopping in the village is maybe, don't quote me here, but it's maybe 3 to 10 times a day. That a lot of the train is taking so much of the ridership east-west. I think we're gonna find that the 105, 106 ridership in the village where the bus would be either stopping is quite small. But we'll get back to you with some.
The archive is closing.
No, we're good for 2 years.
Yeah.
They've got a reprieve on funding and hopefully they can solve that long term.
Yeah, that's good news.
Okay, so this is sort of a check-in. If you heard something that was outrageous and you wanted a complete pivot, now would be a good time to hear it. It sounds like there's gonna be a lot more data when you come back from PennDOT. And then there's gonna be another sort of waypoint before anything difficult to reverse is decided. Fair enough, accurate enough?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to departmental reports. Just really an action item, so. Moving on to departmental reports. Does anyone have an item they want to pull out or anything the staff wants to pull out?
No, we'll respond to any questions.
All right, moving on to regular business. First up is advisory boards and committees 2026 meeting schedule.
Yeah, so this is the heads up that we set that for you. We advertise it, we do all the arranging, so we'll do that. And we'll just maintain the same pattern that we did last year. So this is for if you have a change in that, tell us. Like, so if, hey, we don't want the blankety blank to meet on one night, we want it to move to another night, that sort of thing. And then if you can't make a meeting and your schedules change, probably easier to change liaisons than it is to change nights, but that's up to you. If we don't hear from you, we'll go ahead and reschedule it the same way we scheduled it in 25.
I don't think unless anyone has any other thoughts. Okay. As is wins. Next up is the administrative building planning and design.
Nothing really on our end, or we thought maybe we would get to this point with something, but we don't really have anything for it. Next meeting, we expect to have.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Stacy options.
Well, we're
About the 250 budget. Do we want to push that now or wait?
I actually don't see the 250 budget on the long agenda here. I don't see that as a on the agenda today, Sean.
Okay, she's the one, so I just don't know. She would.
I think it's just come up under historical commission updates.
Is it the HC? Sure. Okay.
If
We'll do that when it comes up.
Next up is supervisor compensation. Mike, you wanted to add this to the agenda?
Yeah, I know, I talked to a couple of supervisors. It's not a huge amount, but for some people who may not want to serve on the board, maybe it would help them. I think Alex mentioned could help with babysitting and stuff like that. And I've talked to this veteran, I think Red or most of the communities around here do follow the state guidelines on supervisor compensation. So I thought, if we never do it, it'll never happen. If we do it, and nobody has to take it, right? If you don't want it, you don't have to take it. And probably my stance. But I think it's something we should put in place to make available to supervisors who are interested.
Okay, I mean, I know I previously said that I'm not necessarily in favor of compensation. I'm not This is a public service we do for the community. But Andy, in terms of like logistics, I think my primary concern is that if we did move this forward, avoiding any scenario where there would be a supervisor getting paid while other supervisors were not getting paid. I have some concerns about the ramifications of that, and are there any ways around that I think would assuage that what I perceive as what could potentially be an issue in initial enactment.
Yeah, so the sort of the constitutional and the statutory parameters require that if a board votes to institute a salary or to increase it or even decrease it, to change it, that action will never apply to a board member who is sitting when that is enacted during your current term. So there are a couple of ways that you see municipalities address that. Sort of the plain vanilla way is if the board were to vote for a salary or compensation, it would roll into effect as a supervisor enters a new term. So in the case of this board, you just had a municipal election. If you voted before the end of the year, you'd have one supervisor who starts a new term in January. It would apply to them. You have two supervisors who would start a new term if reelected in January of 2028, and then two supervisors in January of 2030. And if one of you didn't run or was not reelected, if another person ran, that would get imposed at the time they took office. So the plain vanilla is a rolling implementation. The one thing, in order to address Eric's concern, a little bit more creative, but in line with the statutory requirement, would be that you could, if you move forward, you have to do it by ordinance. If you did it by ordinance and you wanted it not to accrue to any of you until it accrued to every one of the seats, you could pass it and have it first effective, excuse me, in January of 2030. So in January of 2030, there's a reorganization. Anyone entering a new term would get it. And also in the interim, every other one of you would have been through a term cycle. So you could implement it all at once, effective January 2030. Or if you passed it, you could do it in that kind of plain vanilla rolling method. And we would, if you move forward, we would craft a draft ordinance to do either of those things. One note, Michael, you discussed you could take it or not take it.
Mhm.
There are some cases, one of the most high profile ones was an appellate judge who when the state legislature gave a pay raise, one of the judges said, "I'm not taking it." And the court rulings, not by that judge who was giving it back, but by the court, said, if you provide the pay, you can't completely disclaim it. That in that case, the judge said, "I don't want the raise." And the court said, "Well, it's on the books. You take it, you can contribute it back to the township or a charity and take a deduction or whatever is appropriate in your tax return, but you can't pretend it doesn't exist. You have to take it." So if you pass it and board members take it, I just want you to be aware that you could give it all back to charity, and second-class townships can receive charitable contributions, but it's a little more complicated than just saying that.
Okay, but it would be possible to do that. To say,
Yeah, you'd have to recognize it as income, and then you could also recognize it as a deduction if you donated it, if that's how you report your tax returns.
but can it be done just as an administrative thing?
That's where those cases say no.
Oh, it actually has to be paid out.
Correct.
Um,
And then the other just piece, for 30 years, based on population, second class township code had a cap of 3250 for second class township supervisors. If you have a population of over 10,000, Easttown has over 10,000. 2 years ago, that cap moved to 5,450. So if the board were to move forward with an ordinance, that would be the maximum you could do under the statute. That's the number in the statute. But you could pick some other number if you wanted, as long as it doesn't exceed that.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm generally opposed to the idea, but if we were gonna do it, I know I personally would prefer the 2030 route so that, nobody's left out in the cold. I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but it's just been my thought. This is your proposal, so I don't know how you feel about that.
Again, I wasn't planning on taking it. And at least not initially, potentially once other supervisors are taking it, then I would, potentially would. But I would certainly wouldn't want to be the only one. It was the only thing I thought about.
So it sounds like you'd be in agreement with the January 2030. That everybody would be taking it at the same time.
There's no, that would be the end of my term.
No.
No.
Government starts 26.
It would be,
Or
it
27.
would apply to the last 2 years of your arrangement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the board thinks that's a good idea.
Alex, you have any thoughts?
Fine with me. Yeah, I don't care when it takes effect. It's not going to impact us anyway unless we're reelected. But I would say the whole point is to make ordinary people of ordinary means able to serve on it without creating a hardship. Like I've had to pay to have babysitters to watch the kids while I've attended meetings, and it turns out to be a lot more effort than originally kind of budgeted. You're doing multiple meetings for supervisor, multiple meetings for liaison appointments. It ends up being quite a bit of time and expense. So that sort of stuff adds up, and it's barely minimum wage if you start to account for the amount of hours that you put into this type of stuff. So yes, I'm in favor of it. I'm not going to get paid, so it doesn't make a difference to me. But I think it matters to the people going forward. I think we're one of the only townships that doesn't actually pay for this, so I think we need to start doing it moving forward. So yes, I'm all in favor of putting it in the budget.
So I think,
If you decide to do it, you have to do it next next meeting, or it delays 2030 to 2032, correct?
I'm fine with
So
that.
if the board directed me, I would draft an ordinance. It would get presented to you in the first meeting in January. If you're comfortable with it, you'd authorize advertisement at that meeting. And it would get acted upon the second meeting in January. And that would keep to the ability to have it effective in January of 2030.
But then I would already be in term, so I wouldn't be able to.
You wouldn't be, because you're still, in this month, you're still serving out your remaining term. So in January, under the statute, you'd no longer be in your current term.
Mhm.
So plain vanilla, you would be eligible. But under what I think is the scenario of the board, it would be effective for everybody in January 2030 and nobody in the interim.
I think you mean December, if we move this forward in December, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, did we vote on it in December?
correct.
Okay, so it doesn't matter when the ordinance happens, it's when we vote on it.
Well, I might have been that you just
I think
said January,
January.
but I think you meant December. So at the
Sorry.
next meeting,
Okay,
at the next meeting, you'll
Okay.
have the first iteration of this.
Mhm.
At the last meeting in December, you'll have the second iteration.
Yes, sorry.
And that will enable you to participate like your peers are participating.
In January of 2030,
Yes.
I think your scenario is.
I think we have consensus there.
Okay, we'll draft it.
Moving on to liaison and local reports. First up is the Berwyn Devon Business Association.
I have the.
Okay. Citizens Communication Advisory Board met earlier this month, that were not able to attend. ECAC,
Yes, let me see. We met on Monday, November 10th. That's recent. Went over projects. Identified a bunch of new projects that Don had identified. Then they talked about vacancies. I don't, have they got any applications for those vacancies?
No, I think you've got none.
Okay.
next up is EMA.
My wife just had a baby last week. I'm barely coming up for air right now, so no, I didn't attend. I'll do it going forward. Thanks.
I'll get Alex. Next up is EAC. I think that meeting is coming up. Finance work group has not met. Fire EMS,
We're meeting on Thursday this week.
very good. Historical Commission,
I'll give the update and then I'd like Stacy to chime in on 250. They just talked about some of they have some openings on the board and they're talking about that Anna and Palmer wanted to be reappointed. A little bit about America 250. Parks and Rec came and talked a little bit about their photo exhibit of early commerce. ANRO is sponsoring, so that's something they'll be doing for 250. They were talking about who's going to lead what for the new year, like historical markers, and they're getting ready to talk with John, get more information about doing the inventory. That was it. And Stacy, you wanted to talk?
Sure thing.
You're on, Stacy.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so there were some questions about what we would do with $30,000 for the Easttown 250 as part of the American 250. And so we had just a bunch of ideas down on a paper. We've been able to hone some of those in, get a few other answers, other thoughts, other input from different organizations, different people in the township. So one of the things, so let me just go with some of the things that we thought of. One was, and Sean and I had talked about this, potentially investing in some hardware and flags on the light standards that exist along Lancaster Avenue and like on, I think there's one on Main Avenue. There may even be one on Waterloo. And I think I counted up about 21. The flag hardware, like you see like you see everywhere, right? It is two posts that come perpendicular to whatever it's attached to, and then there's a flag that is between those. It's actually more expensive than you think, and investing in a higher quality one, which is a little more money, is definitely worth the investment because they last longer. It makes a difference. They have a spring on them, and we do get a lot of wind going up and down Lancaster Avenue. If we decided to do something like that, it would probably be about $11,000. It's about, and the nice thing about it is as we add more light standards to the community, which is my plan to do in 2026, we could add that hardware or ask the property owner to add the hardware. The hardware is about $250 to $300 for the material. The flags that last usually about 2 years range about $200 to $250. So average them at $500. And so we could add that as one item on the $30,000. The second one is we are really excited about potentially doing a mural at the end of the Potter Avenue building where Chuck and his guys all go and have storage. We'd love to add that to murals in Berwyn. I think it's been very popular, but that particular mural we would work with the Historic Commission. We could certainly have input from the Board of Supervisors. The thought is, what can we do that would be historically significant, relevant, flavored for that building? So it would be something that would be either America, Easttown, or all of the above kind of blending together. That would be like an $8,000 to $10,000 commitment. And that honestly, from what my experience has been, is on the low end, but I think that would be really special, and it would last a long time. We've been working with Margie over at Park and Rec to put together a pictorial on the Waterloo Mills and having some sort of display. We don't have the details. I'm meeting with John and Margie on Thursday, and we're going to talk about it, talk about how many images, the images that she's talking about are being donated, enlarged, and donated by ANRO. So some of it would maybe be an education or a craft or something. But we've talked about potentially taking that and having it be kind of a moving display and have it targeting different audiences. So one audience might be younger kids and they do a craft. Something might be older students and they have a project. Others may be for adults or families, and it could be a speaker, which we certainly have some pretty incredible speakers and connections to speakers in the historic society. So we're working on that, and so we budgeted like $1,000 for that if there's some materials that would be needed for that. And then the other things that we thought would be like really impactful in the community, and these are things that just that money would go toward, of course. There is a lot of planning going on within the business community as well as at the library and at Waynesboro and within between the townships too. So the ones we thought would be really fun would be like something like an embroidered hat that would have something that would be Easttown, like an Easttown 250 hat that would be given out for kids. Another is having a huge printed Declaration of Independence. There is a whole thing about Dare to Declare where people are popping up and they're reading the Declaration of Independence at different events and in different venues, which is super cool. We are working on a Gen Z version of the Declaration of Independence, which is also kind of hilarious. So a huge Declaration of Independence and then asking kids to sign it. That could certainly be a 4th of July picnic thing. A time capsule we thought would be super cool. Getting stickers and stickers that are fun because everybody has them on their water container or on their laptop. All the students in the schools have them, but things that are like, if you've seen some of these online, it's like, it's only treason if you lose. History nerd, too cool for British rule. If history repeats itself, I'm so getting a dinosaur. Crap, that's due tomorrow. And it's a quote by Thomas Jefferson. Like funny things that make people be thoughtful and thinking, but make it a fun thing. And then and then we were talking about that being stickers. And then we also have this historic post project, which is a collaboration between the Historic Society, the Historic Commission in Easttown, the Historic Commission in Tredyffrin Township, EDA Enterprises, the Business Association, probably a dozen businesses, and also the Eagle Scout. It's become an Eagle Scout project. So the kids, the Eagle Scouts are taking these 4x4 posts. They are creating what will be kind of an identifier of something historic or significance to a event, a building, the architecture, maybe a person. They've been identified through the Historic Society. We have about 35 locations in Easttown and in Tredyffrin, but also in there's like 5 in Tredyffrin because of they have the general's houses or something. But of the ones that we have a walking tour in Devon, we have a driving tour, and we have a walking tour that has a ton of stuff in Easttown Township. And the historic markers are red, white, and blue. They're very patriotic. They're they're nice and tasteful. It's a 4x4 post. It will be located at a building site, for example. And when you approach it, there will be a QR code on it. it will take you to a site called Izzy Travel. Izzy Travel is something that's international. And basically, if there's something of interest, historic or whatever, and it's been put on Izzy Travel and you have that app, it will pop up on your phone. So now it becomes something that ties the Historic Society's webpage, all of their information, as well as real live history right in your, literally right in your back or your front yard. And so we were hoping to sponsor just the materials that are needed for that, which are paint and posts and things like that. And, that's about $2,000. And that takes us to about $30,000. So I know that those were questions of things, and I can certainly revise the kind of very loosely structured budget that I had with a little more detail, and then we can talk in more detail. And again, if somebody has an idea or if the board has something that they would like to champion, we would love that. The county is really enthusiastic. A lot of the communities that surround us had much more involvement with the Revolutionary War and things like that. Easttown Township, ironically, didn't even have someone march through it, but we definitely played a part in that time period in commerce and in agriculture and in transportation. So we are a small but mighty township with actually a pretty tremendous amount of history that we would like to highlight for the year and have some of those programs continue on as we continue on. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. Where we were, is that historic commission?
Yes.
Is there anything else, John? Or?
No, I mean, that was basically it, and wanted to just make sure that in the Star Commission as well, that the township was involved, and again, there's the ask for 250.
So ultimately, you have to decide that's what you want to do. You don't have to do it now, but at the next meeting, you presumably have to decide how much you want to put in.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you. Next up is the library.
I'm
Board
sorry,
of
I just wanted to say one other thing. Please keep in mind too, this is a one-time ask. This isn't a $30,000 line item every year. It really is just because 2026 is a special year.
Yeah, we know, but.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
this-
Thanks.
This was better go back. Yeah. All right, thank you. Next up is the library board of trustees.
Meet Wednesday.
Parks and Rec,
For sure, meet tomorrow.
pension work group, I don't think has met, planning commission,
We didn't have a meeting this month.
police work group,
We haven't met since last time.
public works work group.
We did meet, but I didn't take notes.
I'll get my homework.
It was a good meeting. It was a good meeting. I just didn't take notes.
Stormwater management advisory committee.
Had a baby, missed it.
All good. Next up is, that concludes liaison reports. Next we have public comment.
James Hole, Easttown Township, I live in Berwyn, 1291 Farm Road. I was here on October 20th. And I just wanted to follow up on the question that I had about the adjustments for outside water usage with the sewer. We talked about the potential of doing a resolution that would reduce the penalty. And then the other concept was to send an email out reminding people who are frequently filing their outside water usage.
Okay.
And I didn't see anything on an agenda. I wasn't at the previous meeting, so I was curious, did any progress, was any progress made on that?
So you had briefly on this.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really, you have to decide if you want progress on it or difference.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
not
think we
for us
really.
to decide, it's not for us to tell you, yeah.
I know that the board hasn't met about it in executive session yet, so we haven't really brought it up and it hasn't been considered.
Well, thank you. Well, 5 days after I came here, then an amount went into collections. I've never had anything done in collections in my life. I have 850 credits for it. I guess I could maybe talk to you, Sue. I wrote a letter to the law office. They haven't responded to me, but I said they should refer it back. And then the other point I made, and I had some correspondence with Don that was helpful, that it seems like the sewer manager does retain some discretion as to coming up with a different measure. You know, to looking at, and I provide some data about rainfall and my historical bills. I mean, this is a very significant bill that was like $2,200, way much higher than what I've had in the past. And I'd like to try to work with you to reach a resolution if we could. I'm perfectly willing to pay, you know, some amount that's reasonable. I've come up with some ideas about that and resolve it, and I'll write you a check immediately. And also, we've got a tickler in to make sure that we get the measurements in on time.
Just on the staff side, we don't want to be interpreting that for you. You have a resolution, you have a policy, it's been in place for decades. So if it's not our place to to selectively enforce the resolutions. So you have to decide that.
I understand.
Can I just add something? Like, I had spoken to Sue about this, and I didn't know that it needed the whole board to deal with, but it was more, not necessarily a resolution for the problem, but more how to address helping the public be aware. Is that a board issue that goes into exec, or is that just an issue that I can ask?
I think that's the latter, and I think we have to noodle on that and make that as good as it can be.
I think we have, but I guess that's my error.
We did. I talked to Susan after you and I spoke at the last board meeting. She's going to be able to ask for people if they want to sign up to get an email reminder. Yeah.
That's great. So, however, it does appear that in the ordinance that the sewer manager does have some discretion to do alternative measures. It seems to me you don't need to do any resolution for that.
Yeah, I just think that's a policy choice for you all.
I think ordinance interpretation, I think goes to the solicitor, not the board. So I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a line in.
I'm not doubting what you're saying. I'm just saying that I'm not here to interpret the laws. We have a solicitor who I'm sure on the spot.
Then I could look at it and report back.
It's not a policy, it's an ordinance interpretation.
We have the ordinance and we have a policy.
We can have both, that's true, but
Right.
he's
So
asking
we-
about a specific ordinance and how it's worded, and
Right.
not to blitz Sandy was.
No, that's silly, but excuse me.
But that
I would like to see the
yes.
underlying policy and then I'll compare it to the ordinance.
Great, thank you. I have one other comment. My wife asked me to comment, and we've been looking at on Farm Road, just observing the new trash collection service. And since that's gone into effect, we've seen a significant amount of loose trash and recyclables that are sort of floating around the neighborhood now. I don't know what the deal is with that, whether they have they definitely have a different truck, but how they're lifting it and loading it, we're definitely seeing more trash. I think a number of neighbors would report that. So I just ask you to keep your ear to the ground on that if you hear about that.
Well, I think that's something that the town, if you notify the township.
And if you, when you see it, if you notify us, we can get them on it immediately and that will be helpful.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, moving on to announcements for upcoming meetings and events, please consult the township website. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned.